Hello. Hi, everyone. This is Molly. I am one of the trustees of the King's Head Theater. I've been a trustee since 2016, and I love the King's Head. And I love everything it does. But as a trustee, that means I'm an unpaid volunteer, and it means that I have a day job, and my day job is being a lawyer. And I work for a firm called Bates Wells Braithwaite. It is a special kind of firm. It's a B Corp, which means we are committed in our very governance of our firm in investing in the people, both around us and the firm itself, in the community, and in the planet. And at this firm, I specialize in data privacy, but I also have experience in doing commercial work and intellectual property rights. And the tentative title for today's Ask Me Anything is fundraising, because that was a topic I thought might be relevant right now as people are searching around for funds. But to be honest, you can ask me anything you want. You can ask me about being a trustee. You can ask me legal questions and I will answer to the best of my ability. You can even ask me about being an American in London, because obviously I am not from around here. So let's get started. Does anyone have any questions? And if not, I'll just continue to ramble. It's absolutely fine. Let's see here. Still figuring out how to work the technology. Ooh, no questions yet. Well, in which case, I will tell you a bit more about myself. So I wasn't always a lawyer. I actually started out working in the arts. I worked in theater for a bit. I taught theater. I taught communication. I taught speech and debate. I have a master's in performance studies and text and performance studies from King's College and from the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. And I also worked at Curtis Brown, the talent literary agency, for a little bit, which was really good time. And then I decided that I would be much more useful to the cultural world by biting the bullet and becoming a lawyer. Both my parents are lawyers, so I figured I would convert my degree and become a lawyer, and it's actually been wonderful. I get paid to research and to tell people what I think, and honestly, that is the perfect job for me. So, let's see. There aren't any specific questions, and I can't see any. Hopefully, I'm not just completely ruining the technology here. Then I will just talk a bit about fundraising in general. So if you are a charity, there are a couple of more things about fundraising that you have to think about when you're just a non-charity, a regular company. We call that company limited by shares, private limited company. Now, when you're a charity, you have to think about things like charity law and how the Charity Commission looks at things, in the fundraising regulator and the code of fundraising practice. And these are all things that you can Google and read about. But it means that you have to be really careful in what you say, who you ask, and how you ask for it. In particular, how you ask for it. And this is about things of making sure that you're saying things correctly, that you're not overemphasizing issues, making sure that you are not, pushing buttons for vulnerable people. We've all seen it happen before in those appeals of sad puppy looking up at you. Please help this dying animal. I have a question about kicks, so I will get there in a second. So you really have to make sure that you are doing things carefully. And the Code of Fundraising Practice is relatively easy to read, despite being 118 pages long, and I'm sorry for that. And it's just, you can look through and see which sections apply to your charity and apply to what you're doing, and then apply those to your actual practice. Now, I had a question about kicks. A kick, for people who don't know what a kick is a community interest company. A community interest company is a type of company that was set up a while ago it was founded by one of the managing partners of Bates Wells, Stephen Lloyd. A community interest company is more like a company than like a charity, in that you have to have a community interest, a community purpose embedded into what you do, but you're not technically a charity. And so you're still very much a company, but you have restrictions on how much money you can pay out in dividends. And so if you're an arts organization and you pay people and investors via dividends, you have a cap on the amount of dividends that you can pay out. You also can have an asset lock on when that means when you wind up, there are certain ways that you can distribute the profit or the assets of your organization. Now, with a kick, it's sometimes easier to get funding because people can invest in you if you are a company limited by shares, if you have share capital. It can also be more difficult because you don't necessarily have the guarantee of being a regulated charity. And what I mean by that is a lot of foundations and trusts still really like to see an organization acting as a regulated charity. And that means that the Charity Commission has powers to investigate and has powers to oversee how the charity functions. And that's just a bit more reassuring for investors and for fundraisers. But KICs are inherently more flexible. They don't have all the obligations to report and to follow all the governance rules of being a charity. So it can be a better option sometimes for a charity. Are there any other questions on this? Have I answered the question about KICs, Alice? Okay. So another thing to bear in mind when you are doing fundraising is, especially if you're working online, is the CAP code. And that's the Code of Advertising Practice by the Advertising Standards Authority. And that just has rules about how you say things, the promises you make, the types of things that you say. And just bearing in mind those when you pitch your message. The Broadcasting Code of Advertising Practice also applies if you're doing anything online. So Adam, our lovely artistic director, who I miss dearly in this quarantine, has asked me how I decided to become a trustee of the King's Head. So way back in the day, back in 2016, I was looking for ways to stay involved with the arts community while still being a lawyer in my day job and just working on various contracts and things on a day-to-day life. And I had this wonderful opportunity put to me by my friend Erica Crump to meet with Adam and to discuss becoming a trustee of the King's Head. And this seemed like a really exciting opportunity because I love theater. I see as much theater as I can, slightly less now that I have a 3-year-old. And so I met with Adam and we hit it off immediately. I fell in love with his dog Tickets almost from the moment I set eyes on Tickets. And we just loved discussing theater and different ways of producing theater and different ways of looking at theater. And granted, the way that I help the King's Head is more boring than being involved in the creative process, but I hope it's actually quite helpful in that, answering legal questions, getting policies together, that kind of thing. So I decided to become a trustee once I saw the amazing creative vision that Adam and the whole team have at the King's Head, and that I could actually really help them, particularly in this time of transition as we're looking to set up in a new space. I could help them work on the legal side of things and kind of get our house in order so we are a sustainable organization going forward. So that is how I decided to become a trustee of the King's Head. And I do not regret it for a moment. And I'm also a trustee of another organization called Situations Trust, which is a public art organization based out of Bristol. And so for anyone who's interested in becoming a trustee, I would really look to see kind of what organizations could benefit from your particular expertise and your particular help. So lawyers, always in demand. Fundraising professionals, oh my goodness, they are like gold dust for boards. Accountants, really helpful. So if there are any accountants watching this, I would highly recommend looking to get on a board. It's a great experience. Who else is useful? Anyone with just any kind of specific experience that could be helpful to an organization. Boards, charities, and even non-charities should have executives and non-executives who can be helpful, who can dig in and really get involved and be prepared to do so. And that's one of the most amazing things that I found about being on the King's Head board is that the board of trustees is made up of just incredibly inspiring and passionate and enthusiastic individuals who are ready to get in and help at a moment's notice. It is honestly one of the best experiences I have ever had. Does anyone have any other questions? I knew this was going to be a boring topic. We missold it. Should have said it like meet the trustee or something like that. Oh, thanks, Liz. Liz has just said thank you for the insights, and I hope they are helpful. Okay, so we have a question on what's the best way to ask people to become a trustee. So the best way to ask people to become a trustee is to ask to meet them face to face, have a coffee. It's always much easier to sell your organization by having 1 or 2 meetings with other trustees first. And so the trustees can get a flavor of what the organization is like, who the people are like. Then we usually invite potential new trustees to a board meeting to try to get them involved. Again, see what the decision-making process is like, see what the tone of the organization is like, who the other trustees are. And then if it's a fit, you can appoint them at a later date. Because trustee meetings are usually quarterly, this can be quite a long process of appointing trustees, but it's really helpful because it helps you weed out people who are very enthusiastic but may not have a lot of time on their hands. So we have another question about how do trustees get involved in fundraising? Well, for charities, trustees are ultimately responsible for fundraising, and that has 2 sides to it. The first side to being involved in fundraising is they are responsible for doing it in a responsible and compliant manner. So if something goes wrong, if your fundraising teams, say in the Olive Cook scandal, push an old woman to donate more than they should, then the trustees are ultimately responsible and take that blame on themselves. And the second responsibility of the trustees is that they have to act in the best interest of the charity. And that involves making sure that the charity is properly funded and has enough resources in order to function. So trustees also have to get involved in that front. The other thing that we've seen is a shift recently towards a more American model where trustees do actual giving. So beyond just fundraising, the trustees are expected to give themselves at a relatively high level and also encourage their friends and rich acquaintances to give. And this is a much more American philanthropic model, but we see it more and more coming over to the UK. So is there anything else that people want to know? What can't theater companies fundraise for is a question we have. You can basically fundraise for anything, provided if you're a charity that it fits within your charitable object. So you have to make that argument, you have to make that assessment for first. You should be careful whenever you're fundraising about how you phrase the ask, because you could wind up accidentally having a load of restricted funds. So if you say, help us buy costumes for X production, then you are committed to devoting the money that you raise in that ask to paying for the costumes for this production. It can't go towards general costs. It can't go towards lighting. It can't go towards anything else. It needs to go towards the costumes. And so you need to be quite careful when you ask for funds in a very specific manner. And so it's much better to say something more along the lines of, please, can you help us support our theater? For example, by helping us pay for costumes, lighting, designs, so on and so forth. Because when you have restricted funds, that means that they need to be used for the exact purpose for which you raised them. And they need to be held very separately on your account. So when you look at your account system, you will have restricted funds and unrestricted funds. And restricted funds will be some funds that are devoted to a particular purpose. And so that's why you need to be quite careful when you're fundraising and what you're asking for. So again, it's much better to have a more general ask, unless you have a specific thing, like we do at the King's Head, of raising money for a project, for a big project that you need money for. In which case it's absolutely fine. You just need to bear in mind with your accounts and when you're holding the money, how you hold it, and that you keep it quite separately. Let's see here. What else can I say? So another thing I can talk about is just the experience of being a trustee. And being a trustee is quite interesting because You are, as I said, ultimately very responsible for the charity, for the running of the charity, for making sure that, but you are a complete volunteer and you're not paid except in very limited circumstances. And you only meet 4 times a year, although there are obviously calls and discussions that happen outside of that. And so it's this weird mix of being incredibly responsible for something, but also very hands off, because as the trustees, we don't set the program for the King's Head. We don't set the artistic vision. We don't get involved in the casting decisions or anything like that. We're just here to help guide Adam and Fiona and the rest of the team as to how they can best do their work. We're here to support them and say, what do you need? Do you need us to check over a contract? Do you need to sense check some marketing against us? Anything like that. Or at times to act as a check and say, I don't really think that we should be spending our money or our resources in that direction right now. I think we need to focus on the overall strategy. And that is incredibly valuable experience that I really recommend to anyone who's interested, who doesn't necessarily have a job of running an organization, but they're interested in getting some experience in it. It is a wonderful experience. And I've learned just so much from watching the people around me, especially, James, our chair, is an incredible chair of the organization. He is so practical, yet always has the bigger picture in mind. It is amazing. And if you can get someone like James on your board, you are very lucky. And I think that we are incredibly lucky. Right. Does anyone have any other questions? Because we've got 15 minutes or so left. I'm more than happy to just keep talking, because that is one of the things I do best. No more questions? Okay. So another thing I can talk on would be general contracts, because contracts that's what I used to do before I started focusing in data privacy law. And contracts, as we are all learning, are incredibly important right now during the time of coronavirus, because they are how people continue to get paid. Sometimes they need to be nullified if, there's a force majeure, because of the virus, we can't go forward. And I cannot emphasize enough the need to have a written contract in place. And I know that sounds like the most lawyerly thing on the planet to say, but a written contract, it just records, or at least it should record if it's good, what you are expected to do and what you are expecting of the other party, what they are expected to do and what they expect you to do, and the consequences if something goes wrong, and then how to get out of the contract. So quite a simple structure. And if a contract says that, then it provides really, really, really useful guidance to any organization to help them figure out how to get through a day like this. Okay, I've got to know, oh gosh, I've got some more questions. So a contract is really, really, really useful for getting organizations guidance about how to get through situations, especially like this. So force majeure, how do you put on a force majeure? How do you claim force majeure in this situation? Do you need to physically not be able to do something? Or like the King's Head, can you claim it even though we went dark before the government technically required us to do so? These are all quite weighty questions that are up in the air, and a good contract and some good guidance can really help you. So I have a question now on parody production. So if you want to put on a parody production, should I seek legal advice about infringing copyrights, and how should I go about doing that? So intellectual property rights. And copyright in particular. Copyright is just the intellectual property right that covers any kind of creative manifestation. So it needs to be something that's actually tangible, something that's written or recorded in some way, whether it be a piece of music, a novel, anything like that. So there's copyright. The owner of the copyright is usually, or the first owner of the copyright is the person who created it. Now that copyright can then be given, sold, anything like that to other parties. So if you're looking at movies, it's usually to the movie publishing company, something like that. So when you're looking to do a parody, you have this original set of copyrights, the work that you wish to parody. And then you need to think about, can I use that work, and how much of that work can I use? And this is something that we looked at a little bit with the King's Head. over the years. And the problem is that there is an exception to the rules around copyright for parody. Hasn't really been tested that much. And so it's unclear how things apply. And so if it were ever to go to court, I can't really say what would happen, but what I can tell you is what we did, the steps that we took to make sure that it was kind of relatively safe. And that is making clear that it's a parody. So in your advertising, don't try to mimic what you're trying to parody. Make it very clear that it's a joke, that it's a play on the original work. Don't steal whole sets of text. So don't steal whole lines, don't steal whole lyrics, don't steal musical refrains. If you are parodying Hamilton, don't take the song and just rewrite the words, because then you are trying to make money essentially on the original work. And that's where you start getting into trouble with copyright. That's where you start infringing another party's copyright. So keep it original as possible. Make it very, very clear that it's a parody. And if you are worried, get legal advice, because that can help you really mitigate your risks. Even if push comes to shove and you get into a legal fight, you can then point to that opinion and say, but we took advice, we did this as responsibly as possible. Hands up, really sorry if it went wrong, but we did this as responsibly as possible. We didn't do it in an attempt to make money on the original piece. We did it in a genuine attempt to parody it and create a humorous version of it. And I guess that's the final thing that I have to remember. Parody has a requirement that it should try to be funny, or it should be funny. So make sure that you at least try to be funny in your parody, which I know is easier said than done sometimes. Let's see here. Are there any more questions that people have? Oh, gosh. I'm trying to think what else I can say. I realize this has been a bit disjointed today, and I'm sorry for that. I don't have quite as much clear theater-related things to speak to as some of the other amazing guests that we've been watching over the past few weeks. Trying to think of what else. So we can talk more about IP if you want. So we talked about copyright and the original copyright. Now, oftentimes, especially at the King's Head, we are adapting original pieces and we are changing them and making our own versions of them. And you still need to think about the copyright in those situations. You still need to think about the underlying copyright. And that's the copyright in the original play. That's the copyright in the music, whatever music is attached to it. And you need to think about, do I have the rights to do this, to use this? Who do I need to contact in order to get those rights? Is it out of copyright? That's the best case scenario, because then you can use it without much fear of reprisal. Although you do still have to be careful, because sometimes certain versions are still within copyright. And so always be thinking about, if you're using someone else's work, even to pivot off of it and create its own. Oh, Alex saying to check out the Instagram feed. I am not seeing any questions on the Instagram feed. Weird. Sorry, they weren't showing up for me. So let's see here. So we have a question about, do we have a real life example of a contract that was particularly bad or holy? Let me think here. Yes, certainly. So we had a contract that was very woolly and very friendly. And it basically just said, each party will endeavor to do this. And and our client really wanted the other party to prepare a good deal of work for them in preparation for running kind of an online course. So each party will endeavor to do this. They'll take reasonable steps to do that. But the commitment to pay from our party was very clear. And so it was really difficult for us, when push came to shove, to prove that the other party was actually in breach of contract, because there was no actual clear commitment of, you will do this or you will do that. It was just, you'll endeavor, you'll try. On another topic that was really funny, when BuzzFeed was going through its whole reorganization and laying people off and such, they tried to put everything into, we'll use reasonable efforts to do this, but we might not be able to. And we said, okay, push comes to like, why might not you be able to do this? And they said, I mean, we might have to lay people off. We might actually be journalists. So contracts are all in good, but really, really please do have the conversations with your organizations who you're working with and get involved and ask them actual questions about how they're going to be able to deliver the service to you, what they're going to do for you, and when they're going to do it by, because without those conversations, you might not know what you're getting into. Okay, so what else do we have? We have, what are the challenges of working as an in-house counsel in an agency office? Well, James has delightfully promoted me from my position at Curtis Brown. I was not in-house counsel. That was before I was a lawyer. But I was working in finance and contracts, so I saw a lot of the contracts, and I worked very closely with their in-house counsel, Craig, at the time. I think the problem for any in-house counsel is, especially at an agency, which is such a fast-moving place, is being seen as a person to always say no. And that's a problem that lawyers have a lot, is being seen as the ones to stop things and to just say, no, you can't do that. I'm sorry. The law says no, it's too risky, blah, 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 blah. And in-house counsel have that problem in particular. They want to be helpful for the most part. They want to help the organization grow. They want to help you do what you need to do and what you want to do. They just want to make sure you're doing it in the right way. And so it's about crossing that bridge and communicating in the language that both the counsel and the staff, the agents, the assistants really understand. That's a difficult divide unless someone has had previous experience working in media. Someone comes into an in-house counsel role from, just a big city firm where they're working with huge companies. It's just going to be quite a disconnect. And so communication is absolutely key. One of the biggest things that I came across working at Curtis Brown was actually being American and not being in media before then, really, was just the amount of love that people put in emails, and I was not used to doing that. So my emails were very American. My email said, hi, can I get this? Thanks, bye. And I was apparently being very rude, and people didn't like that. Because, you have to say, hi, how's it going? Hope you're doing great. Saw you last week at XYZ. By the way, when you get a chance, could I please possibly get this? And then as many X's and O's as you could possibly imagine. And that was something that was a communication divide for me personally, and that one that actually a lot of people in more professional roles like accountants and lawyers and things like that often find when they're working with more creative agencies and creative organizations. Let's see here. Do we have anything else? It's coming up. Aw, thank you. I love you guys too. Thank you very much. It's very kind. So think about something else. Anything else that's coming through? Anything that I missed on Instagram? Sorry. Looking through here. So we have, how do you decide what type of company you want to become when you're setting up a theater? That's a really, really good question. And I think it'll probably be the last question because we're coming up in the 30 minutes. So if you want to set up a company for a theater, and I really think you should, because companies help limit your liability. It means if something goes wrong, then the liability is contained within the company. And unless you've done something exponentially wrong, it won't extend to you as a director of the company or as being involved in the company. If you want the utmost flexibility and to keep it small, just do a company limited by shares. And that also means that you can take dividends out for yourself, although I know HMRC really frowns upon that now, but it just gives you a much more flexible structure. If you want to attract the kind of funding that comes from trusts and foundations, particularly those that give to charities primarily, then consider becoming a charity. But to become a charity, you have to register with the Charity Commission. It's quite an involved process. They can say no. They've been saying no more frequently recently. And so really getting a sense check on that and maybe getting some legal advice is quite a good idea. Now, bearing in mind that as a registered charity, you lose control. So if you are the founder, you can sit on the board of trustees, but you can't get paid. Or you can be the artistic director and have a board of trustees, but then the board of trustees could fire you. So you're losing some control there. And there are certain circumstances where the artistic director does sit on the board of trustees, but those you need to apply to the charity commission for, and they're quite rare. So you have to think about the level of control there. Another thing that you need to think about is just the time and energy that you have to put into the organization. Registered charities do take some upkeep. You have to have governance procedures, board meetings, do kind of proper charity accounts as well as the company's house accounts. And it's a lot more administrative work as well as thought that goes into running a charity. And so if you don't have people who are willing to invest that time, invest that energy, then I would really kind of go towards maybe trying to set up as a company limited by shares and seeing how it goes. Another option would be to do a kick, which we discussed at the very beginning, which you just have to identify your community purpose, or as a version of a kick, a nonprofit, a company limited by guarantee, but doesn't have shares. It's not a charity, but it is a nonprofit. It means that you can't extract money that easily. So it means you can't pay yourself dividends. And that, I think, is the final question. And that's my time up. Thank you all for being so wonderful and so lovely. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry for missing the comments on Instagram for so long. I'm not sure what happened. But I love you. And keep watching KHT online. It's an incredible opportunity. And next up tomorrow at lunch, we have an Ask Me Anything with Lee Knight, which I am really excited to tune in for because I love him and I think it'll be really fun. So have a lovely time and I'll see you later. Bye.